I think of this as a more global poem than some of Carmen's other poems. It's not culturally based so much. It takes us to sadness and hunger and hope anywhere in the world.
Yeah, pretty universal.
It reminds me of all of the thousands of generic photographs that you see of children in Biafra, or from Africa and fundraising, rock concerts or whatever. And as a professional fundraiser, I have to comment that I feel like she's rescuing this image from its utility, which of course is for a noble cause, and making us think about these kinds of images in a completely different way. What do you think, Norma?
Well, it's dedicated to the child in the photo, and that tells us a lot, especially because she says, and all the others.
And all the others.
So that one child is an icon, a representation for all the others who are in that position.
Yes.
But I do agree with you that it's not, it doesn't seem as politically or specifically cultural tied to that culture. But on the other hand, it is. And I love the fact that she has this ecofeminist take on things by linking it to the earth, the line that talks about the roots and the sky. And so it goes beyond just the image.
Yes, and I particularly love the strophe where she says that this love and the hope that were with this child at birth won't retreat. In naked truth they lash our lies like war and wealth and coldness. That is a very political statement.
Very much so.
That's a very powerful one.
So I can ask, is this a sonnet? Since it isn't a book of sonnets,
yes,
right? But she doesn't conform to the known form.
No, she's deliberately breaking it. It seems like.
And I love that. And well, for me, that's part of the beauty, that it's the magic. It's not just the magic of the photograph, not just the magic of life, but also the magic of the poem.
Yes, because magic breaks the rules of science and keeps to the rules of the human heart.
Goes beyond that.
And the spirit, the formality of spirit that you associate with a sonnet is here. And some of the traditions, the conventions, the rhyme, the breaking into the two stanzas. But as I started going through it, I thought, okay, are there 15 lines, 17 lines? And the rhyme scheme doesn't fit anybody's traditional rhyme scheme for a sonnet, but it works. And I think that breaking of the rules is also appropriate for the reasons that you've talked about, but also because the world is breaking the rules of compassion.
Right. Oh, yes. It's a cry against that. And, it keeps to the tradition of the sonnet in that it is an ode to the beloved. This amorphous icon of a child becomes a person, a beloved person, through her. You can't help but get an image of someone as you're reading this come before your eyes.
And she repeats the word magic at very strategic points. At the beginning, such magic in a child there is. And then later, the magic breath of tiny hands. So there's this, even just having this child is magical already.
Exactly, yes.
I was fascinated by the title using that definite article, not just magic,
Why is it
but the magic.
Yes.
And the child in the photo, I think that personalizes it, and that reinforces some of the things we were saying earlier.
Yes.
That
she's talking to the child. You will not live, and yet you will not die. The love that ripened in your first wet cry.
Yes.
But is it that one child, or is it the reader?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah, because she forces us to think about our own coldness, comfort taught, because it's a temptation when looking at these children to just cast a blind eye, cast a cold eye, as Yeats would say, and but you can't help but there's a spirituality behind it, because she is saying that the hope, the love will transcend death.
Right. Love.
Yes, absolutely.
You will not be but love.
Love, exactly. That is the promise.
I'm also curious how this poem fits. You began by saying that it doesn't quite fit that cultural, where she feels more comfortable, or where, the way the Carmen poems that we know.
I'm not sure she wanted to be called a globalist, though.
That's where I was going.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to preempt you.
No, go ahead.
But
Because, yeah.
well, yeah, I mean, you know, because she is so intensely local and grounded, you know, in so much of her poetry, yeah, her politics seem to be very much opposed to the tendency in contemporary neoliberalism to, you know, look at everything as generic and global and, you know, genetically modify every organism you possibly can. And
one of our doctoral students has coined the term glocal. So it's the blending of the global and the local.
Yes, I think that this is a
it would
global
apply.
poem.
It's a local poem.
But her protest against inhumanity that's there in the Guatemala poems and some of the others is evident here as well.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't remember, when was this written? In the 80s? 90s?
I'm not sure.
I
We'd have to
don't-
ask Carmen.
Yeah.
Because that would, I think, give us a clue as to
Maybe.
the 80s poems. I think you can tell the Guatemala and some of the other references to Central America are very clear. This one is not very clear
Yeah, well,
what that references.
hopefully it will, you know, not die and find its truth in love.
Right. I guess another thing I ask myself about a poem like this is, would the poet, let me see, how can I phrase this? Would the poet want the reader to do what we're doing to it? Or just experience it and come away from the poem with knowledge, with compassion, with some kind of empathy for that child, some kind of action to go from this?
Well, certainly I'm sure that she was motivated by this to touch the heart of the reader, you know, and to evoke, you know, to kindle a cold heart, to evoke compassion.
Yeah.
You know, and it does, and conscience, it makes you think about, you know, what have I ignored? What am I not doing? What could I do? So it certainly tweaks your conscience and hopefully raises your consciousness.
Right.
But it does it through form.
Yes.
And it's a formed poem, a rhymed poem, a sonnet.
Yes.
And I don't think that those two thrusts are contradictory. I think she's calling out to our conscience, but she's also calling out to our sense of form and what can we do to be compassionate, to form a better, more hopeful world.
Well, and a better relationship, I thought you were almost going to say, you know, with, you know, the people of the world, you know. I mean, as North Americans, we have all of this activity of conscience we have to undertake about what we did in the wars in Central America. I mean, here we are having another presidential round. We're not even talking about the wars in Afghanistan or Iraq. I mean, we've totally forgotten about, if you said to a lot of college students, El Salvador, they would hardly know that there was a war there. So we forget.
Unless they're from El Salvador.
Unless they're from, and how could they forget?
Exactly.
Right.
The other thing about the poem that I think addresses this is the way that she uses the tension of two opposing things, like in the end of that first stanza, you will not live and yet you will not die. And then later, well, she brings up cold and coldness, comfort taught. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That coldness is comfort taught.
Yes, exactly.
So to me that says kind of what you're saying, that the poem is within that form of the sonnet and which she's creating, but she's yet giving us a message both about the form and of course the content.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and thinking of the title too, perhaps she intended it for it to be in its own right kind of a magic spell, an incantation.
Oh yeah.
You know, something, you know, much more lyrical than the three witches in Macbeth, but that by boiling and bubbling might have an effect.
And change
And change.
can come.
Indeed.